All right, good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining us for this session of Cornell's 2023 to 2024 Buddhist Studies talk series on the theme of critical pedagogy and Buddhist studies. This is the final session for this calendar year. We will, of course, have some more sessions in 2024, but I'm very grateful that you have joined us all now. So my name is Bruno Shirley. If you've been attending these talks throughout this semester, you're probably a little bit sick of my spiel by now, but along with ZK Payne, I'm one of the two graduate student co-chairs running this talk series. And today I have the wonderful privilege of welcoming our speaker. Mario Poceski is Professor of Buddhist Studies and Chinese Religions at the University of Florida, where his research focuses primarily on Chinese Buddhist history, literature, and doctrine, particularly during the Tang period. His most recent monograph is Communities of Memory and Interpretation, Reimagining and Reinventing the Past in East Asian Buddhism, published open access, I believe, with Hamburg University Press. So Professor Poceski has kindly agreed to allow us to record today's session. The recording light should be on your screen now. If you're not comfortable with your face being shown, if you don't turn your camera on, it won't be picked up by the recording. He's also very kindly agreed to stay on a little past our sort of formal closing time at 1 p.m. Eastern time, just in the spirit of having hopefully a really robust Q&A session at the end of this year. So with all of that admin out of the way, please join me in welcoming Professor Poceski here with us today to discuss integrating contemplative practice into university courses on Buddhism. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation to share some of my experiences on the subject of teaching Buddhism at the university. Also, thank you for the kind introduction. So for today, basically, these are some of the main themes I would like to broach. So in a more general sense, my talk will deal about teaching courses on Buddhism within a university setting. So what are some of the approaches, what are some of the experiences, how we can learn about it, and of course also not just our own experiences, but sharing with the experience of others. So hopefully there will be opportunities to engage in discussion and learn from the experiences of others. And more specifically, as the title of my talk for today indicates, I will be talking about contemplative practice. So the first question is, should we introduce some kind of contemplative practice or some form of Buddhist meditation or mindfulness practice within the formal university curriculum? Should that be part of courses on Buddhism? And if we agree that that's something we should be doing, then how do we go about it? There are different ways, some perhaps more controversial, some less, some more kind of geared in a way that the practice of meditation is more prevalent, some it's more in the background, and so on. But today I'm not going to talk in a very theoretical way, but more basically relate my experience with these themes as I have been teaching over the years at several universities. So let me start first with providing some background about the academic settings in which I've been teaching Buddhism. The first courses on Buddhism I taught were at the University of California, Los Angeles. I was a graduate student there, and I actually kind of developed a substantial teaching portfolio there. And then I was at the University of Iowa for a year. So this was my first job just after I graduated with my PhD from UCLA. And then the following year, I got a job at the University of Florida, and I've been there ever since. So a little bit about the University of Florida. Probably you know it is a well-known university, but just for the sake of kind of making this a coherent presentation. So it's the flagship university in the Florida system of public universities. It's a very large university, one of the largest in the nation. They are kind of, well, this was the numbers there you have is from the previous academic year. Presumably it's a little bit higher this year, but 55,000 plus, kind of moving towards 60,000. And out of those, around 35,000 are undergraduate. And for today's talk, though I have been teaching both graduate and undergraduate courses, I will be mostly really focusing on undergraduate education, which might be relevant to a larger number of people. I mean, there's some overlap of courses. Some of the courses involve both graduate and undergraduate students, but by and large, I will be talking about the undergraduate experience. So my teaching is my degree was in area studies, but really my job, my first job also at Iowa was in religion department, and I've been at the religion department in Florida. We have both graduate and undergraduate programs, and it's a mid-sized department. I don't know what the exact number of faculty now is, maybe 13, 14, 15. It have been kind of fluctuating over the years. I think the maximum have been 17 at some point, and now it's less, and people retiring, I don't know, maybe 1,000 or so. So it's a department in which there are a variety of fields that are covered, some noticeable overrepresentation in some fields and noticeable gaps. For example, we don't have really anybody who's really doing Christianity, for example, which is unusual. I mean, on a permanent basis for a religion department in this part of the world. So the department have been changing over the years. The trend over the recent years have been declining enrollments. Very few majors, so it's not flourishing, at least in terms of numbers. It's not terribly flourishing religion at Florida, like other universities, I presume. So situation is better, but there seems to be this general decline, not just in religious studies, but in humanities in general. But some universities seems to be able to find ways to counteract that general trend. University of Florida is perhaps not one of those that is very successful in that. And so this has been a challenge over the years. Even in my courses, I used to have quite a few students when I started, and now it's not too many, unless it's like some of those required courses or something like that, which I usually don't teach. And that's not just courses on Buddhism, but courses in religion in general. There are not too many students, and there are a number of issues about that. If you're interested, we can talk about later. Coverage of Buddhism is limited. Basically, Buddhist studies at the university with almost 60,000 students is just myself. So if I teach, there is a course on Buddhism. If I don't, well, this year actually, right now, it's one of my graduate students is teaching. I'm on sabbatical right now. I'm not in Florida actually, but the coverage is limited. We have had in the past a second person who did Buddhist studies, but that was a while ago. So I've been the only one for a long period of time, and that seems to be going to remain so. So about my personal background, as I mentioned, I studied at UCLA. My specialty is Chinese Buddhism. And I started to teach at UCLA, and then so developed some of the courses. For example, my Intro to Buddhism course I first taught at UCLA like 20-some years ago. And it was a graduate student. It's a course that was already on the books there, and then developed some new courses. I'm going to show that in a moment. In terms of my my publications, perhaps some of you have read some or have no, but anyway, it's mostly my main focus is in Chinese Buddhism. I publish widely many articles, chapters, books, and so on. most of which are available online if somebody's interested. And then in terms of teaching, I've been teaching both graduate and undergraduate courses, but more undergraduate. And especially more recently, we don't really have enough students to field graduate. In my case, because I'm doing Chinese religions and Buddhism, and there is no graduate program in which students in other departments that do something related to China or religion or anything like that at my university. So really, it's difficult to recruit students for graduate courses. There was more of that early on. Recently, I do quite a bit of individual study with graduate students, but most of my teaching now is undergraduate. And in terms of balancing research and teaching, I see myself primarily as a research person. So writing publications, especially books, is my primary focus. And that's how I kind of, in terms of, I'm against constructing rigid, reified identities. But if I have to construct some kind of identity, it will be more of a kind of academic type scholar, somebody who researches, writes, creates new knowledge, and so on. Having said that, teaching is an important part of our job, actually, as far as our students and the public in general perceive us. They see us as teachers, first and foremost. And I think I try my best. I really feel like just because that's not my priority that I should have poor jobs. I do take teaching very seriously and put quite a bit of time in preparing what I consider to be the best possible lecture. So I feel like I don't feel comfortable with this kind of, well, okay, just teaching kids, kind of cannot be bothered with this, just do the least amount of time. So try to find a balance. If you have to do something, I think we need to do it well, to the best of our abilities. So that's what I've been trying over the years. So these are the courses I've been teaching over the years. Mostly, as you can see from this list, upper level undergraduate courses. And most of the courses, kind of, I would say all, maybe with 2 or 3 exceptions, have been courses on Buddhism. So basically, I'm teaching Buddhism. The reason I've been developed so many courses, and for those of you who teach, you know, developing new courses requires lots of time and energy, and it's much easier just to develop a few courses and just to teach the same course again and again. But I've been trying to find different courses that will be helpful to students. Also, with the declining enrollments at our program, I've been trying to develop new courses that hopefully will be more appealing, with not too much success, frankly. I mean, you develop new courses. There's some, maybe students more, but with some exceptions, like Buddhist philosophy, for example. I don't know, it took me 20 years to figure out I should teach something like that, in part because I thought as our students are not capable of dealing with profound philosophical ideas or something along those lines. But actually that have been enrolling very well, not because of religion, but because philosophy is a much more vibrant program. So they have been students. So it's kind of, I've been experimenting, doing different things. One course that I developed after I graduated from graduate school was Chinese religions. So this is one of the few courses that doesn't deal. And basically, I felt there was a need for that, and that led to me writing a textbook on that subject, which perhaps some of you have seen or maybe used in various courses. It's kind of used broadly. But other than that, my main focus have been teaching courses on Buddhism. And if you teach courses in Buddhism, of course, you deal with Buddhist meditation, right? I mean, meditation is very prominent, integral part of Buddhism. It's one of the, well, several parts of the Eightfold Noble Path deal with meditation. In the 6 perfections of the Bodhisattva path, meditation, jnana is the 5th one. And so on. And of course, also meditation is something that is very popular within the context of American Buddhism, actually within non-ethnic Buddhist temple kind of milieus, that is to say, among what I call to be referred to American Buddhism, white Buddhism, whatever term you want to use. Buddhism in America is often equated with the practice of meditation. So obviously teaching course in Buddhism, if I teach course in Intro to Buddhism, of course, we discuss meditation. But then when it comes to the actual experience of practice of meditation, that's a little bit of a more problematic proposition, at least from my experience. First of all, I've been very wary, very cautious about it. Part of it is about concern of being perceived as proselytizing. We are a public university. Also, the way students come. I mean, ideally, I would like to have only students who are passionate about the subject and really want to learn and experience and so on. But of course, if you teach a course, if you have I don't know, 50 students or something like that, many of them, some of them might be interested, many of them come from whatever, just fit it into their aerobic schedule or something like that. I mean, people come for a variety of reasons. The one overarching reason is accumulating credit so that they can get a degree and have, I don't know, comfortable middle-class life in a capitalist economy and whatnot. But basically, kind of this kind of unease, kind of imposing Buddhist practices, even if they can be kind of presented in a very soft, non-denominational way. So that had been a major concern. So I've been very, very cautious actually over the years of kind of not crossing that Rubicon. And it brings this kind of contrast between inside and outside the perspectives. I'm going to touch in a moment. Actually, I have lots of personal experience myself with the practice of meditation, also the teaching of meditation, and so on. So when I do teach, actually, I kind of tell some stories from my own experiences about people I've met or monasteries or and so on. I share pictures. I have lots of pictures I've taken at various centers and so with my students, but at the same time, kind of presenting this insider aspect of Buddhism, especially through the experience of contemplative practice, is something that I've been generally not very comfortable with. And I've not done much of it until recently, as I'm going to explain in a moment. But then over the years, I've been kind of starting to rethink about the whole academic milieu and thinking about my students and so on, and becoming more open to introducing some element of meditation in the classroom, basically this kind of efforts towards rapprochement between kind of academic study of Buddhism as a subject that can be done from a humanities or social science perspective, and as an actual way of practice that human beings engage with, and they get all kinds of experiences through those practices. So one course that I've been teaching over the years is a course called Buddhist meditation. So this was, I don't know when I taught it last time, maybe a couple of years back. So this was the last kind of schedule of the course from the last time I taught it. And here you can see in the early part of the course, basically, there is some kind of the first 2 weeks general discussion of Buddhism, because most students have not had any background in Buddhism, so provide them some background about the history of Buddhism, about the various traditions, and also about the path, the marga, and the place of meditation within it. And then going to the basic paradigm of calmness and insight, samatha and vipassana, and then Theravada meditation, then meditation Chinese Buddhism, which is more in my field. And then for the main textbook, we use a classical text composed in the 6th century by Jie Yi, the founding figure of Tiantai Buddhism, who is well known as one of the most brilliant philosophical minds in the history of Chinese Buddhism, but he was also very prominent in his systematization of contemplative practices within Chinese Buddhism. And this is one of the several main texts on meditation. He wrote, and it's shorter version of some of his other works are much longer, much more complicated. At the same time, it's a medieval text composed in the 6th century, trying to teach the young people in Florida in 21st century. So kind of it's a mixed feeling, but it kind of symbolizes this kind of academic approach. Basically, this I think they should know the primary sources, they should know the classical paradigms, and so on and so forth. And then a little bit about the practice of Chan and Zen. This is we use this is about the actual running of meditation hall in the context of Korean Zen monastery. This is using a book by my mentor, Robert Boswell. And then towards the end, we move towards the practice of meditation in the modern world. Another element that I started to introduce to kind of give break to the students during the second half is to have like a movie week. And we kind of watch a movie, and then the students are supposed to write like a film review. So for this is a German film, Enlightenment Guaranteed. It's not very well known. It's kind of a little bit of a comedy. It's not brilliant, but it's interesting. It's set up in a Zen monastery, a Zen temple, or like a practicing temple with a meditation hall in Japan, and that these two German brothers go there to practice in search of enlightenment. It's kind of so there's about this kind of cross-cultural misunderstanding. There's a comedic element in that, and so on. And then finally, we have a week that we deal with the practice of mindfulness, but really we don't do mindfulness. We basically talk about mindfulness, the meaning of mindfulness as the place of mindfulness in American culture, the increasing interest in the practice of mindfulness, and so on. So basically approach it from an academic perspective. And then finally, a little bit about this more recent intersections between neuroscientific research and mindfulness. And then students have to write some kind of paper and then present the papers to their classmates. So here, as you can see, it's kind of, the idea is to give an overview of Buddhist meditation, a little bit historical background, major texts, historical paradigms, and so on. What it's not really prominent is the topic for today, the practice of meditation. The course and is something that I've been thinking. I haven't been teaching it very often, in part because I have been feeling not very satisfied with the way the course has been progressing. So this is something I've been thinking. I'm going to come back to that in a moment, but this is how I have been approaching the meditation within the formal curriculum. So basically, it's very academic approach to the study and teaching about Buddhism. So when I talk about meditation, it's not really about practicing or doing meditation or experiencing meditative states, but about the theory of meditation. And maybe I could talk about the practice of other people, namely the social aspects, the institutional aspects of the meditation practice, and so on. So this is kind of, in a way, I mean, if you look at the history of Buddhism, the theory versus practice of meditation, you can also make an argument that Buddhists have done more talking about meditation than actually doing it. At least many of them. There's a huge literature, and this notion that all Buddhists meditate, of course, it's completely mistaken. They are there, of course, the many Buddhists who meditate, but at the same time, kind of how to find this kind of balancing way. One way that I've been trying to give students experience with contemplative practices, some of my courses, is to ask them to do field research. So they have to do field research, find some kind of meditation center or temple, and then they have to engage in participant observation and then write a paper on that. So that's kind of the problem of being in a smallish town in Florida is that there are not many places they can go to. So that's kind of, if it's LA or Los Angeles or some place like that, or New York, there are many more options for field research. In Gainesville, Florida, there are not too many. So that's a little bit kind of more restrictive, but it still gives them some experience in that way without really engaging in the classroom with the actual practice. And students, in general, kind of looking at my approach, students, it's not everybody's cup of tea. I would say it's not most students' cup of tea, this kind of more academic writings, medieval texts, and so on. Students in general don't read, at least at my university. I hope it's better at yours than what you assign them, unless you really somehow force them. But so kind of, with, of course, exception, there are some students who are very keen, but there are very few in between. But basically, you have this kind of, if it's something like my stuff that I've been writing meditation, it's really tough. If it's very academic, and I can understand. I mean, why should they, care or even be able to, well, maybe they should be able to understand and read, but that's not maybe the reality. But academic writing, it's kind of a tough sell. Classical text, there's kind of disconnect. So, like most people in this world, our students are interested in the world in which they live, for better or worse. I personally don't find to be the most enlightened, interesting phase in human history, but it doesn't necessarily matter that much what I think. So it's kind of, so that's kind of what I've been thinking, like how to move away from this, because ultimately, I mean, even if you present all this data information, if you make them memorize the elements of the Noble Eightfold Path, and if they can recite what are the 5 hindrances that the Buddhist meditation and all those kind of things, those are all things that they will eventually forget, probably soon after the exam. But what stays with students, what stays with them is maybe the general impression, the encounter with different culture, with different tradition, opening new horizons of possibilities about thinking, acting differently, having different sets of values, different orientations in life, and so on. And in that context, kind of, while of course it's university, so we should be serious about the academic part of things, perhaps some of this approach I've been using over the years have been maybe not the most effective, and maybe a little bit one-sided. Now, because it's really going against the stream, ultimately teaching is about students meeting them where they are, but not really just catering to their whims and expectations and fixations and limitations, but trying to nudge them into more intellectual, more engaging, more thoughtful direction, maybe opening their eyes to new intellectual vistas and new forms of knowledge and so on. But at the same time, dealing with the needs, the perspectives, the limitations of actual human beings. And this is happening within certain institutional contexts, the corporate university, right? So there are all kinds of students get mixed messages. And then at our university, sure, we have libraries. Some of them are very nice, like the one you can see there on the picture. But really the main events on campus are football games. I've never been to one, but I usually stay away from campus when there is a football game, because there will be 90,000+ people descending on the stadiums. But this is kind of what not just students care about, but also what our university is pushing forward as they try to solicit donations and whatnot. So there's this mixed messages. Officially, it's a place of learning, intellectual discovery, and so on. And at the same time, it's also a place of drinking beer and screaming at when people kind of hit themselves and run after some ball somewhere or on some stadium. And also students are very diverse. I mean, maybe you can generally, maybe you can say they're not diverse enough in terms of their thinking, but they have different interests. There's some, very few, that might have interest in Buddhism. Most of them don't. And that also have to do with local culture and demographics. Being in Florida, for example, is different than being in California. And it's kind of affects how we teach Buddhism. It's kind of definitely there are people who are interested and open and intellectually curious, maybe, but maybe less so where I am, even though University of Florida is supposed to be, flagship in a large state with large populations, that we are supposed to have the best students, the most academically prepared, intellectually predisposed, and so on. But it's kind of a struggle. So in that sense, teaching at that kind of setting is a little bit going against the stream. Now, there's another wrinkle here, and that's have to do with my personal background, which also kind of maybe have shaped the way I've approached these things. Before entering academia, actually, I was a monastic myself. So I do have lots of experience with teaching meditation and practicing, of course. I was from the age of 18 to the age of 30, I was a Buddhist monk. Initially, I entered the order as a novice at the age of 18 in the Theravada tradition in Sri Lanka, but kind of over the years, I've been many different places. I was also then in the Chinese tradition. But also you have been staying at Korean monasteries doing meditation there, also at Vietnamese, not in Vietnam, but in North America and so on. So over the years, I actually taught meditation with temple and so on. Establishing myself as some kind of guru meditation teacher was not my goal. I was like hardcore kind of quest for insight and detachment and so on. I took those kind of ideas very, very seriously. But I did teach, especially towards the later part of my academic tenure. Monastic tenure. I was teaching meditation. So this ability and experience with teaching was part of my background. And also this kind of transition towards academia actually also took place while I was still a monastic. So I kind of started to translate some classical texts, which kind of, lo and behold, were accepted for publication. So I got 2 books early on while I was in my 20s as a monastic, and then that led me to become academic. So this kind of, how is this shaping? Well, I have this kind of experience and background, but at the same time, also makes me more weary of introducing this experiential aspect or kind of proselytizing. Also, in part because I was kind of also quite disillusioned and fed up, not so much with Buddhist philosophy and ideas and practices, but with the institutional aspect, with all the corruptions and stupidity when I have to deal with many of these places I was at. So I was kind of actually, when I became academic, I kind of completely disengaged myself. So I'm now academic. I'm not going to temples. I was basically outside of the Buddhist community. And then later on, maybe in life, I became more comfortable and started to join a little bit more. But still, essentially, so this kind of more hardcore academic attitude was in part because I had non-academic background in my past. And I don't know if I was trying to overcompensate or whatever, but kind of I was perhaps trying to push to academic approach a little bit too strongly to my students. Then several years ago, actually, there was a major change, and this was brought by change in the curriculum at my university. They have been experimenting with having this kind of entry level university course for all undergraduates, where they introduce them to some larger themes about life and values and that sort of thing. There was a set up some kind of course that was, there was some initial setup they did, which was terrible. The students really hated. And then they changed it and they introduced a new program, which was much more flexible, the so-called Quest program. And this course is geared to entering freshmen, and there are different levels. So in my case, it's humanities. So this is level 1. It's humanities courses. And the idea is to develop various humanities courses that will be geared towards entering freshmen. And there's several teams. There are 5 main teams that the course should relate to. And one of those teams is identity. So kind of, so I decided to teach, to develop courses. Actually, I ended up developing 2, one co-developing with a colleague of mine, kind of more philosophically oriented. And then, but one of the criteria, one of the requirements for this program is that Quest courses should have experiential learning component. And then also they should have a self-reflection component. So students learn about some academic subject, but they should also have some kind of experience related to that. And then they should also reflect how does that impact their life and their experience both within and outside of the classroom. So then kind of this makes me think, so I said, okay, let's develop one course like this. I kind of resisted for a number of years, so this is quite recent, but I said, okay, let's develop this. And then, well, they say, voila, experiential learnings. Of course, I'm teaching a course of meditations. It should be on Buddhism, so it should be meditation, right? So I developed this course on identity in American Buddhism. It was I was teaching this course on Buddhism in America, which a while ago had very good enrollment, and it was a good course. And then with declining enrollments, kind of fewer and fewer students were taking, so I kind of mostly stopped teaching it. So I said, let me revive this course, but kind of restructured in a way that integrates this theme of identity in America. The program is very parochial. I mean, diversity means diversity in America, especially race and ethnicity and so on. So it's kind of parochial in a sense of everything is centered about the American experience rather than opening our students to other cultures and other time periods and so on. Anyway, so I developed this, I kind of refashioned my course on Buddhism in America and talking about identity, this kind of stuff that is now fashionable in academia, about gender in American Buddhism, about race, about ethnicity, about cultural diversity, and so on. And then I said, well, okay, then just make the students do meditation, and that's what we did. So this is the text from the syllabus, but basically I'm talking about meditation. So this is what Buddhists are doing. So let me give you an opportunity to experience what Buddhists are doing. And then so we have a whole week. I do some guided meditation sessions, and then the students are supposed to write a paper, and that includes kind of, they have to show that they have understood what, in this case, mostly focusing on the practice of mindfulness, what mindfulness is about their own experience, and also how is that relevant to contemporary life. So the way I did it was first, so during that week, I first gave some general introduction to Buddhist meditations, and just talking about the goals, the aims, the objectives of Buddhist meditation, about main approaches, about calmness, insight, about talking about mindfulness. And then I did I had two classes there per week, two lecture classes and one discussion session with the TAs. So we did mindfulness of breathing. So I would sit in the classroom and I would, well, actually, no, it was an online course. So they will sit wherever they're sitting, but imagining we're in a classroom, and this was guided meditation with mindfulness of breathing. So we have a session of that. And then for the second class was also mindfulness of breathing, but I introduced this element of Kanghua. Kanghua is a type of meditation technique that was developed in Chinese Buddhism, Chan Buddhism, during the Sung Dynasty, like 11th century or so. And the basic idea is to, well, there are different ways, but the way I integrated it, okay, so you kind of practice mindfulness of breathing, and then the mind becomes calm, and then you refocus your attention away from the kind of reflecting or being aware of the process of breathing to inwardly, to basically the mind that is aware. And within this technique, basically ask question like, who is thinking? Okay, I'm thinking now, but who is thinking? So there is a thought there, but we try to trace the origin of thought back to the subject or the place or the point from which this thought originates. So you hear a sound. Okay, there is a sound, there is hearing, but who is it that is hearing? This is just introduced, it's kind of within the context of this calmness, kind of mindfulness meditation. Most of the students didn't quite get it from what they wrote it, but anyway, so to give them also kind of a broader experience of Buddhist meditation. So that's kind of, I thought after that, yeah, this is good. I should do this to other courses. And now I think the last year I thought I kind of started doing this in other courses. And so basically, I think I will do this. I don't know how much I will be teaching in the future, but if I teach or whenever I teach, to introduce this, I think this is a good element of experiential learning to be included within pretty much all courses. So from now on, I think I will be doing this kind of thing in pretty much all my courses. Field research also, this can be complementary. So when they kind of go there again, problems being in Florida, especially in Gainesville, maybe if you're in Miami or something, it's a different story there. But still, it's not California or something like on West Coast like that. But so you kind of integrating that also. There will be still challenging, still going against the stream and so on. Still, humanities marginalized. Students are, I wouldn't say pushed away from taking courses in humanities, including Buddhism, but the incentive structure is such that there is more limited interest, and then there is these other issues of personal interest and background and so on among our students and so on. But I think it's something I would like to explore. Certainly when I go back to teaching next year, I would like to do more of this kind of thing. Now, there's some additional consideration, additional recent developments that I think work in favor of this, actually. It's but also some obstacles. The first one is online instruction. So when I started this experiential learning week, actually the courses I did were online courses, and yeah, online is not ideal. Our university pushes online teaching. Apparently, somebody decided they have the number one online bachelor program. As I said, we have almost 60,000 students, but apparently that's not enough. So we need more. So having online degrees and programs is one way to do. I mean, I'm mixed about it. Obviously, like also not just teaching, but like I wouldn't be able to talk to you if you didn't, you know, if there was no this opportunity. Maybe we can get invited or so on, but that's kind of involves more complications involved more funding and so on. So there is something about online instruction. So I personally like it for myself. I like I, I like my home study. I can drink my tea at home. It's very comfortable and so on. In terms of the students, I'm not sure it works. I mean, always it's kind of obstacle in terms of the kind of experience I'm saying. So we tried the best. I've also noticed when I've done a little bit field research at various temples, monasteries, centers. This is like a side interest, almost like a hobby of mine that I sometimes do. And it was interesting to see this kind of transition to online retreats or meditation sessions at various centers, especially during the COVID period. But it's kind of, I think, some of that is kind of there to stay. So there's some pros and cons, but I think there's some serious cons to doing this online. And of course, well, if the course is in person, then that's not an issue. The other thing is about the nature of the students and the nature of the institution. My department was like a hippie commune, like, I don't know, you just, for many years, the first decade I was there, enrollments were not a major problem, but there was no pressure. Like, okay, so just what do you want to teach, when you want to teach it, and just do whatever you want to do. Now, maybe because of pressure from administration and so on, and maybe fear of being cut, maybe even eliminated as a department, there is much more of chasing of number. And then chasing of number involves catering to students' needs, desires, and expectations, which are not always for learning something deep and profound or having multiple experiences, but finding courses that are easy. So kind of lots of discussions about what are catchy titles for courses and so on. I mean, I think we should understand who the students are and should try to meet their needs and so on, but not in a way that we succumb to this kind of race to the bottom, which seems to be prevalent. And having to deal with this lessening of interest in courses in Buddhism region and being creative in terms of how we respond to this challenging predicament, trying new things. Let me kind of briefly, I think I'm I want to finish this soon. So there are some changes that work in favor of this kind of endeavor. I don't know, for those of you who are interested in electric vehicles, you probably are aware that Lucid, which is one of those high-end startup companies, introduced a prototype of a new electric vehicle, Lucid Gravity. And this is the advertisement for this. Basically, within the car itself, there is a built-in meditation experience. So there's a guided meditation. So you sit in your car, maybe when you charge somewhere, and then you kind of the screen light up some kind of wooden experience, or maybe some brook kind of, and then you just meditate, and there is a guided meditation. And basically this points to this, within the culture, American culture, even though in academia there's a shift away from humanities and so on, there is a mainstreaming of meditation, and especially mindfulness that's happening within Buddhist communities, but more importantly outside of Buddhism. So you're probably familiar with the secular practice of mindfulness, which falls takes place in a variety of secular contexts, corporations, hospitals, schools, military. At my university, there is a mindfulness program. It's not like academic program or anything like that. It's like they lead some kind of meetings, and they do mindfulness understood very, in a very, very generic way. Some of it is this kind of new age kind of listening to some bells or something like that. I'm not involved too much with it. Apparently, they are not interested with somebody who is doing academic study of it. Recently, there have been some approachment, but basically, this is a chance, kind of. So, as mindfulness is becoming more popular in the culture, maybe some of our students might be more open to, and then we have to find a way to tap into that. So this is some of the, so many universities have responded to that. So this is some of the universities that have established either centers or programs. So it's quite a trend in academia. There are also changes in the physical space of the university. At the left is Stanford have some kind of center where it's kind of this kind of quiet contemplative space. At my university on the right, there was this building that somebody donated money in a very nice kind of lake area on campus to have a place for quiet meditation. Unfortunately, it turned out it's not used for that purpose that much. It's kind of used for weddings because that's more lucrative, but it's still a space there. It's kind of usually it's locked if you go there outside of the weekend, but also the area around it is quite nice. So kind of as I come towards the end, it's kind of this is still an ongoing reflection. So I'm not really having some solution here, but it's kind of sharing my own experience about how to go about this balancing act of integrating some kind of contemplative practices in academic courses. I welcome your comments and suggestions either right now in a couple of minutes or later. I'm still thinking how to do this, but basically it's how to negotiate a balancing act to be academically rigorous and serious in our teaching, but at the same time to understand that Buddhism can provide certain resources that can be personally enriching for our students, and how to meet our students for where they are, to kind of start not with what we think should be, how should be, but with where they are, without succumbing to their whim desires for easy courses, inflated grades, and those kind of things. So this is something that is ongoing. But I think it's something that is worth thinking about, experimenting, trying, and I invite you to suggest different ways of doing it, to engage. And I hope this was maybe not very deep in terms of some kind of providing some kind of theoretical templates, but maybe it's kind of part of this larger discussion about how to go about teaching Buddhism in a slightly different way. That's all for today. I'm sorry I went a little bit longer than perhaps planned, but thank you for your attention. And if there is some time, if you want to stay, if you have questions to ask, I will be very happy to respond. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those fascinating remarks and really insightful reflections on teaching meditation, particularly in a very modern context. I particularly enjoyed that second to last image you just had up with the students meditating in front of what looked like the little owl camera, which we struggled with in our keynote talk just last week. So we do nominally finish these sessions on the hour in about 5 minutes, but as I said at the start, Professor Poceski has very kindly agreed to stay a little longer if you have the time to participate in a Q&A. And the first question in that Q&A is going to come from Monica Sanford, who actually is going to be giving her own talk in this series in the coming year. So Monica, if you're feel free to unmute yourself there.
Thank you, Bruno. Nice to meet you, Professor Poceski. I'm Monica Sanford. I'm at Harvard Divinity School. And my question is related mostly to the meditation that you're teaching in the classes themselves. As you noted, it was a two-part guided meditation technique based on developing calm through mindfulness of breathing, and then moving on to the Kanhwa technique, the who is thinking technique. And I'm wondering, how does that work or not for students who, if with one session of guided meditation, maybe have not sufficiently developed calm before moving on to the next technique. I know that working with students, they often report to me that it takes many sessions for them to sufficiently calm their mind. So how many of your students are able to successfully move from mindfulness of breathing to the Kanhwa technique, and what do they report about their experiences, and how do you assess if they've successfully engaged with either technique or not? Not necessarily for the purposes of grading, just to know if they're actually following the technique successfully.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the good question, and thank you for your participation in today's event. Well, about the students, actually, it's kind of cross-section. About this larger course, the Quest course, there are 60-some students. I don't really know the students. I hardly meet them. So it's kind of impersonal. It's online. For the smaller class, for example, I taught a course. What was it? I think it was Buddhist philosophy course or something like that. But the last semester I taught, like it was in the spring. So I did this. So they were smallish, kind of. So I had much more closer interaction with the students, and we were able to do this in person. So there's a kind of different experiences, but some of the students have experience actually already with meditation, and this is kind of becoming much more common, especially mindfulness. They might even have been taught in schools and whatnot. So in terms of teaching meditation, and this was even going back to my monastic years, even though my tradition is more Chinese background, I find Theravada approach to be more helpful, more geared towards large, and I think mindfulness of breathing is to be like a very common technique that can be applied. It's very easy to apply, and it's, I mean, if they don't kind of concentrate, that's part of the meditation. You're aware that you're not calm. That's what you're mindful of, whatever is happening, right? So you try to be calm, but if you're not calm, if you're distracted by thoughts, you're aware of that. So it's difficult. I mean, there is so I didn't have time to go over it, but so I'm thinking revamping completely my Buddhist meditation course and having much more this kind of practice, maybe more than just 1 week. For this particular course, for others, it's not going to work. But I'm still thinking, and if you have some suggestions of how to go about it, how to integrate that, and but the practice mindfulness of breathing is very easy technique. I don't do just mindfulness of breathing. I start with like mindfulness of the body, so it's kind of different parts, and then awareness of physical posture, and then moving on to the breathing also. So there are a little bit more elements than just focusing on the breath, but giving the tools, I think it's a practice that unless somebody is completely very mentally, I don't know, disturbed or something like that, it's a fairly easy practice to do. It's and it's also very effective. I mean, it's a very helpful practice. I think it's also non-denominational. I mean, there is no particular Buddhist content. It's just breathing. It's just being aware. So it's kind of, in that sense, you're not imposing certain religious beliefs or anything of that sort. But yes, there are challenges because you're still teaching something in a kind of very limited setting, and without having feedback. I mean, my main feedback from my students is from their papers, right? Usually, at my university, students don't show up for office hours unless you force them to, like, you have to approve something. So I have a limited experience. It's just the culture of the university. Of course, if I was some small liberal arts college, it's a different experience. Perhaps Cornell is different than that. But in our university, you don't have so students write about some of their experiences, both in terms of the field research and so on. So you kind of sometimes you feel bad about it, like some students, like, I don't know, I went to Jacksonville to some Zen meditation center and we practiced meditation, and after 5 years my legs were hurting. I was feeling like screaming. I feel like, gee, what have I done to this young person? But on the whole, I think the students are quite open and receptive and appreciative, for at least the ones I get some feedback with, and then there are also students who just, I have, okay, so this is just a paper, I have to do it. So they try to do whatever, just do the minimal amount of work, just treat it as another assignment. But yes, there are challenges, and I don't know if I answered fully, but perhaps, yeah. But to keep in mind that still being a meditation in a classroom is never going to replicate or replace. So it's just to give them a taste, to give them experience of what Buddhists might be experiencing when they engage in this kind of practices, and beyond that, what they want to do beyond that. I mean, that's entirely up to them. There have been students over the years that have tried to start Buddhist groups, which usually does not work because you have one or two students, they get excited, and then they spend lots of time thinking about the name of the group and this and that. And then by the next year they graduate, and then so it's kind of it can be a little bit tough, but basically still the classroom experience can provide some kind of foundational introduction, and then it's up to them if they want to follow it further. So, thank you. Yes, Eric.
Hi. Thanks for the talk. It was very interesting, and it evoked a lot of actually memories so of teaching. So I've never taught a course on Buddhist meditation per se, although I've thought about it, and I've actually sort of half mapped one out. But I teach when I've taught classes on Theravada Buddhism or Southeast Asian Buddhism of a general nature, inevitably there's a class or two about meditation. And so I just have a few observations that maybe sort of flow into suggestions. So one thing is I always try to pair classical texts about meditation, say from the canon. Actually, I try to find something canonical from the Pali scriptures. I tried to find something vernacular, but perhaps pre-modern from the Theravadan tradition, and then I'd try to find something very kind of modern, right, in terms of description and or even explanation, right, about practice. And I found that useful. The students actually, it was productive to have a conversation across those eras and genres about what was going on in these texts per se. And of course, the students are always, inevitably the students are interested in meditation because of the general, cultural setting. And I was reluctant to try to, to teach it, but I was happy to, if they had reactions to reading these texts, right, and trying to do it, I was happy to talk about it, but I wasn't going to provide instruction per se, because especially it was just a class or two. There's not enough time. It's not like when I taught on, I used to teach on the Antioch Buddhist Studies program in Bogaya. They have a whole class that's about a critical but immersive engagement with meditation, and then you can really sort of dive into it, right? But the other thing I did, which again I found useful, is I would scour YouTube for short videos that provided supplemental information about meditation in the sense of the vernacular living tradition that they obviously couldn't get just from text. And it also, I would aim for Southeast Asians, either lay or monastic, speaking about it. Sometimes it was instructional. Sometimes I would try to get a genre. Like I would get a mix, with at least one or two of instruction. Another about them talking about the benefits of meditation, which then expanded beyond just this sense of a modular kind of psychological self-help, right? Which opened up other interesting questions. And then I would always try to find some videos that described more the social life of meditation. So for instance, discussions, descriptions of meditational monasteries or retreats, or, what the life of a retreat is like, or something like that. And again, I found that very beneficial in getting students to think beyond just their own presumptions about what meditation is that they came in with, and to expand it beyond it being, just scriptural and or kind of, sort of individual. I mean, it really wove in the kind of more devotional, the way meditation is embedded within devotion and veneration and worship, which was, I admittedly, also a general agenda of my introductory classes as a whole. And that I found both of those kinds of techniques, sort of useful to sort of get a classic. I mean, I basically tried to treat classic modern little guides of meditation, like I could use chapters from this, but basically treat it as a primary source, right? And then ask the students to think about it as a primary source. So I found that useful. How to put it? So it maintained a kind of scholarly, critical approach to it, but it brought in non-scholarly voices and perspectives, and beyond just sort of the textual, the contemplative, the scriptural. And I imagine, if I would have expanded on all of that if I taught a course just about Buddhist meditation, in terms of really expanding, trying to expand their horizons and counteract their presumptions coming in about what Buddhism is and what Buddhist meditation is.
Well, thank you. Those are very, very good, thoughtful ideas. And as a matter of fact, it's pity that you didn't develop that course, because it would have been a wonderful course. One thing, one thing that I've been thinking from what you said, it's about introducing some writings by contemporary teachings. In terms of how our students will respond, I'm of course aware that they would prefer Thich Nhat Hanh to Je or some other medieval monk. Though I personally prefer J much more. So, but then it's not about my preferences. So to find, I think that's a good way to do, is to bring myself to introduce some writings of contemporary teachers, and also to enrich the instruction through all these other like clips and videos from YouTube. And I've actually done some of it. I didn't have time to cover, but it's also a good suggestion. So thank you. This is something that, as I said, it's nice to have this opportunity to hear from you, hopefully from others, to have this kind of broader discussion, to absorb ideas, and even for those of us who are kind of getting in age, still to learn new things, and to kind of respond to these new challenges, and to come up with new ideas, and to reform it. So I'm in the process. I think this will be helpful. Some of what you said, as I think of reformatting my Buddhist meditation course, maybe.
One other thought I had. This builds off of what you just said. Again, I never did this because I never taught a course just on Buddhist meditation. But I imagined, giving them some, readings and instructions from someone like Gunatne, and then pairing it with Thich Nhat Hanh, and then asking them to really critically reflect on the differences between how this is being framed and the actual instructions, right? To really get them to think critically about, different voices within the Theravada tradition, different agendas, right? Different backgrounds, different audiences, right? And that they're not all just they're not all just bourgeois modernists treating meditation as a kind of, psychological technique of self-help, right? But even to the degree that they're not thinking like that, they're still thinking in different ways, even when they're not thinking like that, right? So that's, again, I always adding this comparative, sort of comparative voices in the same genre, seems to naturally produce critical reflection on the parts of the students. The trick is finding, finding comparable bits that you can't ask them to read the whole books, because we know what undergraduates are like now. So the trick is always finding, digestible but rich snacks of reading, so to speak, right, that can work. And that's often where a lot of the time was spent trying to figure that out.
No, that's another excellent suggestion. Thank you. I don't know if there is another question or two that's if anybody, I will be happy. Or if you have suggestions, doesn't have to be a question. If not, we can conclude.
I don't have any others in my chat at the moment. So perhaps what you might do then is wrap things up here. Thank you once again for a really wonderful talk, and thank all of you who've stayed on the call for joining us for this discussion.
Thank you to you, to the program that is organizing this, and to everybody who participated. And hopefully there will be more opportunities. So hopefully this is something to be continued. So let's hope we have, as Buddhists say, planted some karmic conditions that will fruition in further discoveries and opening up of new intellectual vistas and new thoughtful reflections and so on. So thank you very much. Have a nice day, and all the best. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.